Good morning everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Now, we have been off schedule for a while. There has been a lot of crap going on from just before Christmas through the past couple of weeks. Bushfires, car issues, some issues with people, etc. So things have just been a little bit off kilter, and I'm going to try really hard to get back on track. I have like 5 or 6 videos that just need voiceovers done to share, food related ones that I've been doing, because I didn't do my initial, normally when I do my 6 weekly grocery hauls I do my initial daily sort of videos, but because it was just before Christmas I didn't get it done. So I've got a lot of videos about using the food like I normally do, and how to extend it, and any recipes I've tried and all that sort of stuff. And yet again, I'm underneath the secondary solar array and the inverter fan just kicked in, so you'll have to ignore that for me. So yes, I have 5 or 6 maybe more videos all put together, just need to spend the time to do the voiceover. So I haven't had a chance. We've been instigating some new homeschooling stuff, and I just haven't had time. So I'm going to do one right now for this video, and then I'm going to try and get out here again later this afternoon and do another couple more so that I can get some videos scheduled for the next week or so of all this food that I need to share and want to share. Not only because I want to share it, but also because, as we all know, consistency is key with YouTube, and my lack of consistency means that my views and algorithms and all that are all skewed too, so not as many people are seeing things and stuff like that. So I need to get back on track with that for the new year. The new website is coming along, hopefully I'll have that done soon as well. And we still haven't done all the tie-dyeing that we planned to do, so there will be a day of that at some point. I just need to put aside a whole day to do it. We might do it as a school day, and we'll do some things about geometry and patterns and stuff as part of the doing that as well, and then that way I won't have to supervise schoolwork for that day as well too. So we will see how we go. But anyway, on to today's video. Today's video was birria. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced or if it has a roll on the R or anything like that, but it is a beef, can be other meats. I think it originally was predominantly goat, to be honest, but it's what you find a lot is that it's beef related. I got sent a couple of TikToks with it in it, and it looks really good. So you can turn it into shredded beef tacos that you fry in corn tortillas and things like that. All sounded wonderful. I didn't get a chance to get to it until now, but I bought a chuck roast whole when I did my groceries haul before Christmas, purposely to use some of it to try this. So I ended up making the beef one, but I also made a pork one because pork is half the price of beef, and for our family we went through about the 2.5 kilos of beef in one meal, which is a lot of cost for meat in a meal. So if I can reduce that and use pork instead, then that would be a bonus. So I did both sorts. So I'm going to walk you through doing both types, how I did it, the changes I made between one and the other, pros and cons, and then my thoughts on how I'm gonna sort it out again. And it wasn't anywhere near as hard as I expected, and it was delicious, so definitely worth the effort of doing it. And I'm sure you could do it with chicken as well, to be honest. Like, you do it with any meat that you want. The beef was definitely our preference though so far, but there is a few things I'm going to change. So I'm going to walk you through how we did that and show you the end results and stuff like that, and hopefully you all enjoy it and get some inspiration for a new dish to try, and see that it's not as hard as some of those TikToks and stuff make it feel like it should be. So here we go, check it out, and I will see you on the next video. Hopefully we'll have some daily to second daily food videos over the next week while I get them out and get them sorted and get some of my hard drive space cleared up as well. So I'll see you on the next one. Bye guys. Okay, so we started with the beef ones. Now you make a stock base for the birria, and I did a lot of reading, a lot of watching YouTube. The Views on the Road here on YouTube has some really great videos for this style of food as well. Did some research on different recipes and sort of worked out what I wanted to use. Now all of them use this particular type of a chili. I have no idea how this is pronounced, I probably should have checked, but I'm guessing it's a guajillo chili or a guajillo chili, I'm not real sure. And it's a specific mild sort of a chili that they use for this dish. I ordered these dried online, and I have ordered some seeds in the hope to attempt to grow some, but we all know how my garden season is going so far. So I haven't managed that yet. But I did order some seeds to give it a go at growing them, but I ordered a bag of dried ones in the meantime. So I ended up using the entire bag between these two recipes, so I don't have any left at the moment. I added carrots in there, as well as onions and garlic and bay leaves, because that seemed to be the standard sort of thing. The recipes vary a little bit, but normally you'd have some bones of some sort in this. I didn't have any beef stock bones left because I had fed them all to the dogs, because I had been cleaning out my freezer. But the other thing that people suggest is short ribs would work, and we did have some short ribs, but I used them. So next time I might give it a go with some bones in there as well. But what I ended up using was just the chuck roast that we bought. So I just cut up about 2.5 kilos of it, because that appeared to be what most of the recipes used, into large chunks to use for this. So I threw all the stock base items in, and then I added the beef to it. So I didn't brown the beef in this particular occasion. I didn't brown any of the veggies and all that sort of thing, because I was going by some recipes that I was looking at, and this was how they did it. So we decided to give it a go following this process first. I always like to follow some of the processes that other people use before I try and adapt it, because then I've got like a starting point of how other people do it before I figure out how I like to do it. So we added all the beef into the stock based, and I did add some beef bouillon powder as well, because I have some, but also because we weren't using any bones or anything, so just to boost that flavor a little bit. And then I put the rest of the chuck roast into the fridge to use for something else. I ended up canning that, which I've got a video of for later, and then just cooked it for a while. So you bring it up to a simmer and you keep on cooking it. You want to skim the surface of the broth when the scum rises to the top, which is pretty normal in this sort of thing. I don't imagine it's necessary. It's just more about aesthetics than anything else. So I skimmed that scum off the top of the broth as it was simmering. You only need to do it sort of 3 or 4 times in the first initial part of the simmering, and then it stops coming to the surface like that. And then I cooked it down. So I did it on my Camp Chef, and I'm doing it in a stainless steel pot, which is not necessarily the best combination. The Camp Chefs run quite hot, and stainless steel runs quite hot. Ideally, this would be good in a great big enamel cast iron pot, to be honest, but I don't have a really big one of those yet. Maybe that's something I need to invest in. So I did it in the stainless steel for this particular case, which meant that it cooked down quite a lot, probably more than it really needed to. But at the same time, that's going to mean that the flavour was really concentrated as well. So I just made sure it didn't burn and kept on simmering it while it reduced, and kept an eye on it while it was doing it. As I said, it definitely reduced more than I would have liked, but it didn't burn, and that's the main thing. Once the meat was falling apart, so this took a good, I want to say 4 hours probably, maybe longer, for that beef to break down till it was falling apart, and the colour of that broth to go that really rich colour. Once it was falling apart, I removed all the beef to shred. Now, I added a little bit more liquid to the broth because we wanted some broth as well, and so much of it had reduced, so I added a bit more liquid to that. A lot of the recipes they blend the broth at this point, but the problem, like to blend the chilies through and stuff, but the problem was that there was a lot of meat left behind as well, and I wasn't real keen on the idea of blending the meat through the veggies and the stock, because blended meat's not the most appealing texture, to be honest. So I decided not to blend this, and we were just going to use the liquid off the top, and then we used the extra solids in that for something else. I had to go through and pick the big pieces of the chili out, because you don't want to be chomping on that and things like that. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work, because it was obviously a bit of a error in judgment there. So once you've figured out what you're doing with, you pull the meat out and you've got the broth behind and all that sort of thing, you want to remove some of the fat from the broth to dip your tortillas in. So the idea is that a lot of the fat rises to the top of the broth, and you scoop that off, and that's what you're dipping your tortillas in. So I pulled some of that aside and to use for that. I also made a cashew queso-esque sort of a spreadable cheese, queso, I don't know how it's pronounced, queso probably, kind of spreadable cheese for the kids to use with theirs and for Darryl to use with theirs. So it was sort of blended cashews with garlic and some nutritional yeast, some lemon juice, onion powder, some smoked paprika. You could put some, probably should have put a couple of those fermented chilies that I've got in there, because that probably would have added that sort of spice and heat and colour to it, but I wasn't sure what level of heat those fermented chilies have yet because I haven't used them. So I just went with sort of a basics there, and a bit of oil and some boiling water as needed. Blended it in the Thermomix to just sort of get it to the right consistency, scraped it down and blended and scraped down and blended and all that sort of thing, and made sure that it was nice and smooth for them to use. Now they love this cashew cheese on anything and everything. Like, they will eat it cold straight out of the fridge. They'll spread it on wraps with ham or bread or anything. Mix it through bolognese. So I knew that by making whatever I made, because with the Thermomix you sort of have to make a bit of a larger batch too, because it doesn't blend very well if the batch is too small, but I knew that they would eat it regardless in something, so that was fine. So it was really hard to film the making of these because it was the first time we've done it, and it's a little bit of like, there's multiple steps and it's a little bit fiddly, and Darryl was helping me. But basically you want to dip your corn tortillas into the fatty broth, and then you place that on a cast iron pan, and then once it's and while it's frying, you add your meat and cheese to it. You let it melt a little bit, then you fold it in half, and then you flip it the other way until it's nice and toasty, like a hard taco sort of thing, filled with the meat and cheese. Ideally I would have made some pico de gallo or some salsa or something to go with these. I think it would be really nice to have that slightly cold tomato as well, but they were super tasty. The beef was unreal in this, like this. It was just amazing. So we definitely really enjoyed them. So the next thing we tried to do though was, because beef is so expensive, so it's about $15 per kilo. You can get it on special sometimes. I did notice that the butcher that I go to has it for $12 a kilo at the moment, but of course I'm not shopping until February, so that's life. But it is about $15 a kilo. The pork that we buy, we pay $6.99 or so. I think it might have just gone up to $7.99 a kilo. So about half the price for the pork, though we do lose some of the pork in the rind and things like that. But it is about half the price. So I decided that we'd give it a go with pork. I had looked around a lot, and there was lots of different recipes that use different meats, so we decided to give this a go. I also decided to do it in the pressure cooker because it's a whole lot less gas time than slow cooking it on the stove. So I changed a few things to give this a go and see how it went. I decided to brown the meat off first too, so we chunked the pork up and I browned it off in the bottom of the pan. So I'm using my stainless steel Buffalo pressure cooker or canner, and it can be used for either, this particular unit. It is a 30-litre unit, so it's quite large. And so I browned all the pork, and then I added the vegetables and the chilies. And so I did the same. I used bay leaves, onions, carrots, and the guajillo, whatever it is, chilies. I'll try and remember to put the name up here. I also added a tin of tomatoes, because when I was looking at a bunch of different recipes, a lot of them had tomato in it, and the first one didn't have tomato in it. So I thought I'd give this a go, adding some tomato, because in the pressure cooker I wanted a decent amount of liquid anyway. So I added a tin of tomatoes in there as well, and that helped me deglaze the pan too. So all those yummy browned bits from the pork and stuff get picked up with the liquid and deglaze the pan, and add that to the flavour of everything else. So the other thing I researched too was the blending of the sauce and how we could do it. So what I decided I would do is, by browning the meat first, then starting the sauce, before putting the meat back, I blended that sauce. So I was going to use my immersion blender, except that my immersion blender broke. I think I've mentioned that. So I'm using a Big W cheapy one, and it definitely was not strong enough to do this, and the pan is really high too, so it was very hot. I also cut the carrots quite large because of how I'd done it with the slow cooking, when I should have diced them up a bit smaller, knowing that I wanted to blend it. So I ended up using the Thermomix anyway. So we transferred it all into the Thermomix and blended it into a paste. Once it was into a paste, I added it back to the pot. Now, being pressure cooking, you want to have enough liquid in there to make sure that nothing burns, so I decided to add some stock to it as well. But except that I didn't have any stock, and it's going to create its own stock as it cooks too, to a degree. So I just added some water and then added the stock paste that I make with the Thermomix into it as well, to add a bit more salt and flavour, because it's quite salty, so it adds a little bit of herbs and salt and stuff there. And topped that up to, I think I put 2 jugs in there, maybe 3, enough to make it look like it was enough liquid to cover the meat and make it work. For me, is how I looked at it. This is all, obviously, remember, this is all just sort of figuring it out as I go along. So once I added that, I added the pork and put it under pressure. So we wanted the pork mostly covered by the sauce, so we just put it all in and pushed it down so that it was covered by the sauce. And then we put it under pressure. Now, everything I was reading said 42 to 45 minutes when they're talking like an instant pot, because that's how most people are making this, not a stovetop pressure cooker. So I did it for the 45 minutes because that's what it said. Now, I would normally pressure cook for 90 minutes if I was doing food, because that's how long I do it in jars too. But I went with the 45 minutes because that's what everything seemed to say. Pulled it out at the 95 and it was falling apart, so I left it at that. But I probably will do it for the full 90 minutes next time, because whilst it was falling apart and all that sort of thing, if you look, the larger chunks of pork, they're still pork coloured in the middle. That sounds weird, but they're not like glossy red like the sauce. Like in the beef, every bit of beef was coated in that sauce and covered, and the beef had that red sort of a glossy look to it because it had all the sauce in it, whereas the pork, when you pull it apart, there's lots of bits of pork that don't seem to have been touched. So if I went longer, I think the pork would have broken up more in the sauce while it was cooking, and therefore taken on more of the flavour, because whilst it was very nice, there was a bit of lack of flavour, and I think that was purely because it just didn't take up enough flavour, and whether that was my fault for not putting it in there enough, like whether it needed longer for pressure cooking, whether it's purely because it was pressure cooked instead of slow cooked or not, or whether the pork naturally just doesn't take on the flavours as well, whether it wasn't pressure cooked long enough, etc. I'm going to have to keep on experimenting with that, but it was still supremely tasty. So we used the same method, but I figured out a sort of a more efficient way of doing it, and I sort of did it myself, which sometimes is more efficient than getting help as well. So what I did was I had both cast iron pans going, and I dipped the tortilla, put it in one pan, and then once it was ready to be folded in half, I'd put it in the other pan, so I could have multiples of the folded ones in one pan that I was just flipping backwards and forwards, while I still had the full span of space in the first one to do that initial fold, which you sort of need more room and maneuverability to do without cracking the tortillas. So that seemed to work really well for me to be able to get a lot more out in a decent amount of time, which made the meal a lot quicker than it had previously. So I think that worked quite well. And then I didn't show it last time, but the idea with the birria tacos is that you serve them with some of the birria stew as well, the consomme. So we did these little bowls of the consomme that we then had the tacos, and you dip the tacos into the stock and then you'd eat them, and it was a really, really nice way to eat it. It definitely elevated the dish to dip it into that stock and then eat it. I think, as I said, a bit of salsa or some pico de gallo or something like that would be nice as well, to add to that slightly different texture, crunch and temperature as well. But by dipping it in the stock, that definitely increased its tastes and texture as well. It was really nice done like that. So we did that and served it like that, and it was delicious. So on reflection, the pork was lovely, but it wasn't anywhere near as tasty as the beef. So we're going to do a couple of test runs of different ways of doing that. I have considered that perhaps I could make that sauce mix up with the chilies and stuff and puree it like I did, and then use it as a stock and can beef or pork in that stock, and maybe that would be really nice. I'd have to try that. But it is a fairly fatty, but I think it would work because I can beef and pork with no, like I dry can them anyway with no liquid, and that's quite a fatty anyway. So we'll see. Anyway, that might be something I try. I do have to get some more of the chilies and perhaps try and grow some, because we could go through a lot of them. Because it's definitely a well-loved dish by everyone, it really was. The other thing is too that I want to try and buy some masa harina, or masa, however it's pronounced and whatever it's called. Obviously I am making a dish that is not from Australia. So some of the ingredients are a little bit different, and I'm doing my research, but at the same time it's not going to give me the correct pronunciation or necessarily the correct term. So I'm working with what I've got. Feel free to correct me in the comments. But I want to make some of my own corn tortillas. I may even look at buying some corn and attempting to nixtamalize it myself. And then grind it, because I'd really love to buy a mock mill or something and grind some of my own whole wheat and corn and things like that, but it's a little bit out of our budget for a while now, so we will see how I go with that. But that would be really neat too, to buy whole corn or even potentially grow some and dry it and then nixtamalize it myself and then grind it to make corn tortillas. That would be really neat to have that whole process as well. Adds more work, of course, but that's life. So yes, I'd like to make my own corn tortillas. I will buy the masa initially to give that a go. I have a cast iron tortilla press as well. And then eventually maybe get to the point of being able to grow corn or dry corn or buy corn and then nixtamalize it myself and grind it. So we'll see. But it is definitely something that's going to be on rotation more, and I'm going to keep on fiddling with it to work it out. So we definitely need to get some more of those chilies and dry them and things like that. But it's well worth the effort of giving a go and seeing if you like it enough to be added to your rotation of meals, because it was really, really good. No veggie meal. We've had a lot. My next what we eat in a week again is very low on veggies. Because we haven't got fresh stuff coming out of the garden, and as much as we eat a lot of frozen ones, they're not my favorite, and then my mood hasn't been superb, so food has been all too much effort. But anyway, so no veggies with this dish either, really. There is in the stock and stuff, but not really. So it would be nice to serve it up with something, whether it's a salad or something like that. But again, no garden means no fresh salads and stuff like that. So it's not the greatest summer for us in the way of fresh food. Normally we would be just loving fresh food at the moment, but it's not worked that way, so that's life. But definitely worth making, definitely worth the effort, and I hope you give it a go and let me know how it was for you. Do research before, don't take my word for it for the method and things like that. But we were very happy with how it turned out, and we're going to keep on working on it. So thanks for joining me again today, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.